Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Smashy Business Show. I'm Warid Ahmed, and I have with me Majid and Richard today. Happy Friday to all of you. How are you guys doing today?
Very good. Yeah, nice to be back again. Richard Fitzgerald and
Abdul Majid.
This is Friday the
It's Friday the 7th. Yes, it's the 7th of February today.
Ward, you're running with the MONIIFY story. It's a big one, isn't it?
Ooh.
What else? We're going to go into depth. I was brought on to talk about it, so we're going to talk about MONIIFY. But you've also got a couple of things lined up we're going to talk about today.
It's a really good one. Now, if we go with MONIIFY, I feel like this is something really important to always mention. It was launched in Dubai on November 26, 2024. And Richard, you were there. You were there for it.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. I think next we will also talk about the Saudi Tadawul and Leap conference and Deep Fest, which is another part of Leap starting in Riyadh tomorrow or on Sunday. But I was at the launch. Ward, I think I remember speaking recently to someone in the media sector who was involved in the early years of ARN, and then he moved back to Australia. And then he came back, and I think it was at the time that MONIIFY was launching. And his comment was that Dubai's and UAE's and the region's a great market because if you announce something, you're going to make a splash. Whereas in other parts, it's hard to get that traction. And I thought that was quite interesting. And MONIIFY did make a splash. Although I was speaking to a presenter of a well-known business breakfast in the region yesterday who had never heard of MONIIFY, it did make a splash, right? Like it was in the news. They had a big launch.
Gen Z heard about it. Gen Z heard about it. Every young person, they knew it was happening.
Their logo was splashed everywhere on the 1 billion followers
Remember
summit.
Global Media Congress? It was on our summit passes. It was absolutely everywhere.
The influencers who went to the Museum of the Future launch were the big names, were Khalid Al-Miri and things like that. There were big names at it. So you're right, it did reach the Gen Z.
But I think that's where the issue was. It was big names, not big voices.
Yeah, I think Majid's putting a post up now, and we mentioned Quibi, Quick Bites in the US. There was also, there's plenty of examples around the world of the term that's used in the US is benevolent billionaires, right? Because what's the alternative for media these days? How do you make money? Like news organizations are shuttering around the world. Journalism, the business model is broken. The big tech platforms are taking ad dollar and no one's really paying for subscriptions, right? So what's the choice? And in the US, in the last few years, benevolent billionaires, Steve Jobs' wife, Jeff Bezos, Mark Benioff own Time, The Atlantic. Is that the one she owns? And Lauren Jobs Powell,
Atlantic, it's the one.
Powell, and Washington Post, but that hasn't necessarily worked. But at least it's kept people in jobs until now. Washington Post is letting go a lot of people, but so this benevolent billionaire term. So we're sort of saying, throwing money at the problem isn't the solution. But it's a way to have jobs, it's a way to get traction. And they did that. We've been doing Smashy since 2019, 2020, and we're doing it the long, slow, steady haul of the way. And there's other people who are sticking with legacy media brands and gradually transitioning them, not cannibalizing their business. If you've got an events business or a print business or a TV business or a radio business, more power to you. If you're generating revenue in that way, at least you're employing jobs. So there's many different ways to make media and to make a business model around media. Obviously, when we saw some of these numbers, when we saw, and let's talk about them. Like when we heard that budgets were over $50 million for 150 people roughly to make all these long form shows, we sort of thought, original content, how are you going to do it,
Yeah, and we were also told anonymously that about 80% of the people there were sacked. It first started with the contractors, and then it went on to the full-time employees. But what really stood out to me is that none of them saw it coming. They didn't see this coming. They didn't think it would happen to them, and reportedly, they didn't see it coming whatsoever, and they were told this will not affect full-time employees. And I think what's ironic about the entire situation is that it's called MONIIFY, right? So to monetize. And, Naguib himself, the Egyptian billionaire and telecom giant in Egypt, he went on to say that I want to make people rich. And I think that in itself is the entire issue. making people rich. Did you want to make people rich, or did you want to make the company rich? And the company, of course, because it's a media startup, it's not going to be rich right away. So I think that's what happened there, They were aiming for high numbers immediately and right away, and that's not what they received. And that's completely normal because it's a startup. It happens with startups.
It does, but when we saw it, I remember when Blinks launched, I remember hearing about the app that they were making and how it was like Snapchat, and ultimately Blinks did really well on Instagram because it had Blinks Now, and it was at the time of the 2023-2025 genocide in Gaza, and they started heavy news, and people were like, oh wow, look at this. So it kind of worked, and it got quite big quite quickly, but it was treated like a newsroom. And actually the ex-Al Arabiya leader in terms of news, and he knew what he was doing in news, and it had one sort of regional audience. Seeing the mixed posts, social media strategy alone looked a little bit hard to see who's going to follow this Instagram account. Is it someone in Singapore? Is it someone in Amman in Jordan? Is it someone in Cairo? Like, who's going to follow this, or KL or whatever? So from a social media strategy point of view, should they had more naming conventions? I know I'm getting quite granular and detailed, but I agree with you, Ward. Some of the purposes of MONIIFY and what Naguib Suarez was doing, the messages and the purpose of it made sense in different ways. But how did it all come together? He thought that legacy media was broken. He's right. It needed new legacy media. He also, at the end, he wanted his legacy to give back. But was this the right way to give back? He also felt that young people needed to learn how to make money. He's right, but is this the right way? Ray Dalio and Principles. At the end of his sort of hedge fund, not BlackRock, the other one that sounds like that. At the end of, what's his hedge fund?
He has a Bridgewater Associates.
So Bridgewater. So he launched Principles. Principles is a book. It's an app, and he does speaking tours, right? It's not necessarily a media company. It's profitable, probably, because it's a great book. It's a great app. The idea is to give people principles on everything you launch at Bridgewater. So could MONIIFY and Naguib done that if his purpose was to help people make money?
Yeah.
If the purpose is media, is this the right way? Everyone can do things differently. As I said, it may still work, but looking at the unit economics of media these days, it's hard.
Yeah. And not just that, I think this entire MONIIFY story, it's a reminder that media is scary. No, really, it's really scary. Like, even me, like, I sat there and I'm like, whoa, like, this is the beginning of my career. I should be a bit nervous here because of the fact that people just get sacked off a lot. Like, I remember I sat with these news reporters before, and they just, like, popped in a lot of big names. I won't say what they are. And they're like, oh, this one, like, they sack off people a lot. Like, every 6 months, there's, like, a rotation of presenters. And it's, like, the media world that we live in. It's not stable. Yeah. It might seem like it is, but it's not.
You mentioned, Word, that they didn't know it was coming, and who's accountable there? Them for not knowing it's coming, or for the leadership for not communicating that it might happen? And some of the stuff that we're hearing, we saw redundancies during Corona. We saw put Excel sheets around the region to know where the talent can find new jobs. As a media employer, I would love a list of the 100 people and their contact details. Yeah. To able to help them, or necessarily if we wanted to employ them, and I think, imagine you and I talked about what Airbnb did during Corona when they couldn't rent out their apartments. Brian Chesky gave really great severance, and he was lauded or appreciated for how he let people go. So there's a communication thing. But going back to the point, I was just listening to a New York Times daily podcast this morning about what DOGE, the Department of Government and Efficiency, is doing in the US. And the US government, civil service jobs, that's scary because they're being left go, left, right and centre. And I think this is, we're adults. This isn't a home. It's not the equivalent of being kicked out of our family. Yeah. Like, losing a job is part and parcel of the workforce. Yeah. And I think people who are too comfortable and complacent and not knowing that this is a hairy ride become a little bit too entitled sometimes. And I see it. I see some decisions made in this organisation that can lead us down the path that might end up letting some people go. And I want everyone to stop making those decisions because I feel responsible. You know, alhamdulillah, we haven't let anyone go since we did a really, really, really small reduction during Corona, like 4 people, and now we're 115 people, and we haven't fired people over business, and we have 3 loss-making offices in the region, and still we're not letting people go, right? And we're doing it because we're accountable, we're responsible. But I want this to be an organizational approach. You know, we're in this together. Like we are profitable. We are for profit. And this going back to the point of benevolent billionaire is that if you work for a Jeff Bezos or Mark Benioff, who's the Salesforce guy, or someone linked to Steve Jobs, his wife, and that sort of Apple money, you think, oh, I'm cool. I can go out and I can book expensive hotels, and I can have no accountability on budgets, and I can pay for fancy meals to do interviews, and I can just do it, right? And I think that's the point. Like, if people are being complacent with budgets in organizations, there's no such thing as a free lunch. One of the first principles of economics, there are knock-on effects, and I think it's true, right? If I've seen some of the studios here, and without naming names for MONIIFY, inside one of the wardrobes, one of the changing rooms, is about 16 or 18 outfits. There was money in Dubai Mall or places like that to, you guys are hosting a show. Yeah. Wouldn't you love to have shopping budgets?
No.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, we would love to, but
and if we had a budget of $2.5 million this year for this show, right? Would you think everything's fine?
No.
Knowing that there's no advertising for this show?
I'd focus more on how I look than what's coming out of my mouth. No, I definitely would. And that's why, like, I really emphasize the fact that they took on influencers. I think there's an issue with that. An influencer can be great alone with their own brand and their own personality.
But you get the point, though, about the money part.
Yeah, but see, I would understand because it's very simple. If I see too much money going in and nothing coming out, I'll be very scared. I'll be like, this is not sustainable. Yeah. From a business perspective, it's never sustainable that a lot is going in and nothing is coming out.
It's not your job, and I think journalists and content creators should be focused on building audience and not having to worry about money. But I think you need to the point of them not knowing it was coming. Yeah. Well, okay, but it's a business. Yeah. Do you think that this gentleman doesn't ever want to make money? But let's talk about that influencer point. Do you think that influencers can't make media, or?
It's not that I think that It's not that I think that influencers can't make media. It's that I think that influencers are influencers, and their entire brand is about being them. Do you know what I mean?
Totally
because
agree.
if you take a look at it, like every influencer who's developed such a large brand, what is it all about? Them, their personality. If you're gonna walk into an entity and you're gonna represent it, your job is not just to tell a story about yourself. It's to tell a story about whatever branding that they had, and what I felt like it was tough for them to move from their own branding, their own personalities. Right. Like, for example, one of the presenters that works for MONIIFY, and I think he's absolutely great, Isa. I think he does an amazing job. Nice. But I remember that he was in Khalij Times before, and I used to watch his videos with KT Plus.
Right? Yeah, he was with.
I think it was probably a contract. Yeah, he has his own consultancy, social kind of agency, but he has his own brand, and he worked with Nastelli a bit. Worked on the Visionaries and New Media Academy, and it's great. He's a really good presenter. But I get your point, and I think they want to collab posts on Instagram. It's about their profile growth.
That's what I mean. I feel like they thought more of the appearances and the engagement more than what's coming out of people's mouths. They were like, okay, they're great. They make a lot of money. They're influencers with a lot of followers. We're going to bring them on and they're going to say really good stuff. And it's like, I was watching the videos. They sound really good, but like nothing coming out of their mouth is actually of worth substance. Yeah, do you understand what I mean?
I see what you mean. I think some of this is subjective on whether it's substance or not. I think the business model needs to, a good business model designed for people like that can work. We see there's one podcast network in the UK called Goalhanger, and they have all the biggest podcasts in the world. The rest is history, the rest is politics. I'm quite intrigued to listen to Alistair Campbell, who was a spin doctor media guy for Tony Blair in British politics in 1990. Went to Damascus last week and interviewed Ahmad al-Shara, the leader of Syria, in the rest of politics. That will be the biggest listen to politics interview globally, probably, unless Trump does one in the next week or so. That's from 50/50 rev share podcast network, right? With two hosts, with creators, with influencers as the journalists. We saw Tucker Carlson Tucker Carlson interviewed Waleed bin Talal, which we'll cover, but also Piers Morgan was in Riyadh. Piers Morgan signed a deal a few years ago with Rupert Murdoch, the old media in the UK, and he had a show on the TV, on a streaming service, I think Now UK or something, called Uncensored. He ripped up the contract, got out of bed with that agreement, and is continuing running Uncensored as his media channel on YouTube alone. Now he uses their studios, but he's so independent creators and influencers can be the model if it's done in the right way. Vox Media in the US, a bit like Augustus Media, you know, text, audio, and video, newsletters, magazines, social media, websites and apps and stuff. They have a really good podcast network by working with contract agreements with big creators like Cara Swisher and a few others, right? So designed in a certain way. There's also a podcast network in Riyadh. Abdulaziz, who's the founder of Mike's have 30 hit shows in Saudi, all in Arabic. One of the biggest shows in Arabic is the most reviews on the Apple Podcast Network in the Middle East. I think about 30,000 reviews. I don't know the exact name, but it's Saturday Sofa something. It's about a mental health podcast hosted by a female. And he does a 50/50 rev share. They're not employees, right? But it's designed in that way. And I think, going back to the point, if MONIIFY wants to be like Smashy Business or Morning Brew, then it needs to stick to that. If it wants to be a creator-led network, it might do that. And, you know, it's not over for them. You know, they had three leaders. They had three CEOs reporting into Naguib. One left, Dr. Yasser, and then there was two others, I think. And, you know, I think when you have so many, when media is so fragmented, when you have so many different visions, it's hard.
You're right. It's a branding.
But it doesn't mean that they're all wrong. It just means that they're not aligned. And maybe this decision to pull back 2 months in will save the 50 jobs. They didn't shut down, and will build in future to 150 jobs. You never know. Like, I do think it needs alignment, and leadership can come from below, it come from above. Like, it can come in different ways. Like, I think they need to pick a path. Do they want to go down the MONIIFY path, or do they want to go down the creator network path? And there's opportunity in the region in that. I see the opportunity.
And you know what it also is, you know, you mentioned like branding, and that's why I come back to the influencers. When I took a look at the influencers, I don't think money. Like, this is a business journalist standing in front of my face. Like, I completely trust them. When I look at them, because they've built brands that are already so big, when I look at Hisa, I'm like, oh, like, that's Hisa. Like, you know, I imagine his, like, really entertaining, like, very wholesome videos with all those, like, graphics that are happening all the time and the dramatic presenting. When I look at Carly, like, you know, I imagine her brand. I don't think of MONIIFY. I don't think of money. And I think that's the issue that's there. I think that it's actually a better option to bring somebody that nobody knows yet, and then they become what that thing that you want the brand to become. Does that like make sense? Like, no seriously though. It's even with Smashy Business. It's like because it's all I've been doing, and I don't associate myself with other brands. You think to yourself, like, this is business right here. I didn't look at them and think, oh, like, you're telling me good business advice. I'd actually watched their accounts more than I watched MONIIFY. Like, it didn't actually drive me to the account to love it and be loyal to it.
Potentially, there are other presenters there as well. I'll give you an example. Cheddar was a streaming network in the US founded by John Steinberg in about 2016, 2017, 2018. It was at the time where we thought OTT linear streaming was going to grow. And it was one of the inspirations behind Smashy TV, the original Arabic business show, and the platform. And they raised $50 million, sold for $250 million to Atlas or whatever, and have since kind of cancelled their subscription. He's left, and they've kind of nearly shut down, right? So where that also indirectly failed. Like, you don't really know of it as the next Bloomberg for young people, but they put semi-related creators on the show, pulled back. I remember the the Business Casual was their first. Maybe that was Morning Brew. Sorry, that was Morning Brew. But they launched podcasts with creators and then pulled back. Morning Brew launched podcasts with big creators and then pull back. And now they do the daily show like this with talented young media professionals. And that's a different approach. But I think you're allowed to test. I think you're allowed to make mistakes. And I think it's great. On one level, it's great that people are trying media in the region. When the Western world says there's no media here, there's no freedom of speech, in other words, some constitutional thing, but there's no media here, there is.
And but they were trying a lot of money there. They tried a lot of money there. And I think also with that, like, you know, it gets me to this point of, I feel like they underestimate young people and the kind of stuff like we're gonna listen to and the kind of stuff that we're gonna take in. Because I watched MONIIFY and I was like, okay, dog coin, but like how am I gonna make money out of this? Does that make sense? I feel like they were more obsessed with appearance there. And by the way, young people, like, they catch up to things and they notice things. I remember I went to this event in Abu Dhabi, it's called Mirbad, and I spoke to this Emirati guy and he was just like speaking to me about like media companies, because I told him like, oh, I work for Augustus Media, Love in Dubai, because that's the name that people immediately catch up to. And he said, ooh, Love in Dubai. And I said, oh, like, he went like, I'm going to tell you something. My favorite is the New York Times. I like legacy media more. Keep in mind, this was like a 22-year-old. But he said, Love in Dubai stands out to me. And I was like, why? He said, you were the only people who covered Sheikha Mahira. You guys were the only ones who constantly kept covering it. So young people, they do have a keen eye for this. And they do notice these things. So you can't just come tell us that you want to help us. You want to help make all of us rich. You know, it sounds too good to be true. Like, I'm still not rich, you know. And I am.
What do you think, very shortly, what is the path forward for them? Because the statement that we saw, very clear. We want to put the website behind a paywall, one. We'll build sub-brands, and most probably they were going to sponsor their daily shows. What's the best path forward?
I think they're in a difficult situation right now. I think they're in a very difficult situation right now. But there is a strong visual identity. This region is ripe for brands like this. I think they need to pick a path. But we've seen many brands around the world pick a different path and rebrand. The Onion was interviewed a lot lately, the satirical American one. That's got new leaders. People pick up these assets and they do something with them. We bought media assets in the past, like 7 Days newspaper and stuff like that. So there are different paths to them. Right now, it really looks difficult to see that they'll be around this time next year. But if they are, I think they'll pick a path. Do they need to be making money this time next year? It depends on the appetite of the Naguib Sawiris family office in this aspect. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, and it's crazy because Rich, you're actually right on point, because an anonymous source told Smashy Business that this was the line that was given to everyone that was laid off. The company decided to go in a different direction, and we are changing our strategy. Hence, some roles have become redundant.
Yeah, and look, the original, when we heard this was happening, we heard about 2 weeks ago, and we decided to keep the sources confidential and not publish it then. But we heard that they were moving away from the originals and keeping it into vertical video and shorts. And some of the original shows were high production and getting 300 views on YouTube. And the reason given was, it needs time, which is true. But I think the strategy to move away from long form, and I watched some of those YouTube videos and I looked for it on the podcast apps and they weren't there. And they don't have a WhatsApp channel. So this begs me the question, is the digital strategy fully thought through? But then if they're doing shorts and originals and they focus on that, and I think there's the clue in terms of what they'll do next. I think they'll do that. But then, at the launch event on that day where we were given expensive Samsung tablets with MONIIFY logo at the back.
You gave it to me. I got it.
Yeah, we were told, this is basically the start, and then in Q1 next year we'll be launching an app that will help people advice about how to make money. And then I started getting confused because the apps that help people teach money are usually trading investment apps. They're not necessarily media companies. And MONIIFY to me is a consumer media company, like Bloomberg, not like Smashy Business, or it's a consumer media. It's not It's not the next level of media, which is industry media, which is more about financial advice and deeper look. And I think so. I think they'll stay consumer media. I think they'll do vertical video. They'll give it a shot for 6 months. Realize it's also hard, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see, definitely.
Also, just last thing, I felt they brought TV to social media. That quality of production. I saw some of the pictures during the launch, some of the pictures and the videos launched by all the influencers that did pre-event videos. There's like 20 lights in a studio. Why are you doing that? Why are you spending so much on that? Because you're trying to create a TV-like production, a very good, high-quality production for social media. And what we realized when you came to the show and she was making a story, you have to be relatable to normal people.
You do. As you say this, Maj is sitting in as a fancy studio with LED video walls and fancy lights. Look, I think it's different. Like we look at, I saw a studio on TikTok of Dude Perfect and content creators in the US. It's like a games room. It's a theater. Apparently, BuzzFeed studios are fancy. I think you can build up to it. Anas Bukash's nice studios. The Mo Show in Saudi started small, and now he has bigger studios. I think it's debatable, right? If like Piers Morgan has the biggest YouTube channel, and he's got big studios, so it's kind of relative. But I think it goes back to the unit economics and the money and the costs, and that sort of, and you know, the reality is like skills of production, audio, sound, lighting are relative in a digital world. But is the economics relatable, and do you get the return? And you know, absolutely. Old world TV production thinking needs to be adapted, but it can be. It doesn't mean it needs to disappear completely.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing Candace Owens. Oh, I love her. Are you seeing her work?
Yeah, I don't know.
Crazy.
I don't know
it's
about
really
her production, but she always comes up on an X for me because she's so pro-Palestine. She tells it like it is. You know, she calls the shots over there in the US. But yeah, let's have more Candace Owens for this region.
Yes, and for our next topic of the day, what's actually happening in the region and coming up, LEAP 2025 in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh is going to take place soon on February 9th. To the 12th. So basically, right after tomorrow, I know that Rich is going. Are you excited about it?
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I think it's, is it the third or fourth leap? Feels like at least the third. Very much, it's huge, Ward. It's in a place called
I have FOMO. I have a lot of FOMO right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of these conferences are hard to navigate. You know, we talk about one of the biggest in the world in Web Summit, Lisbon, is about 80,000. Leap touches 200,000, about 180,000. I think GITEX here can hit 110, 140 in the 5 days.
That's the biggest one that can do this.
Yeah, but Leap's huge. I'm speaking on Sunday at like 5 or 6 p.m. on a panel. We're talking about all things AI. We will be there. Smashy Business will be covering. We're partnering. You can see it all over our newsletters.
Yeah.
They have two parts to it. So they have the Leap part, and then they have Deep Fest, which is an AI conference.
It's like GITEX and North Star. North Star was more for startups. But Deep Fest is more for AI.
And you know what's really interesting? I actually know a lot of university students who are flying out to Saudi for it.
Really?
Yeah, for LEAP. They're like really excited for it. And it's so interesting to see. And honestly, I don't blame them. Like everybody's going to Riyadh now. Everyone's going to Saudi Arabia. The possibility that you might meet somebody who might entirely change your fate. And even, by the way, at SEF, they actually had a great turnout. I found out that the number was 14,000 specifically. Yeah, on those 2 days. So it's going to be interesting to see how many people they're going to have.
It's a good number. Yeah, I agree. I think the headliners, the big speakers, sometimes when I go to LEAP, I hear the Saudi vision for startups and the funds like STV as part of STC and all these sort of funds and things, and that's inspiring. You know, often when I sit there, I go, I need to be an entrepreneur, right? Thinking that I'm not, but like, because it really does inspire young people to be startups, whereas FII is more about foreign direct investment, it's more about attracting giga projects and things like that, but the Deep Fest is great. And, you know, you mentioned SEF, and we have a lot of things, a lot of conferences to inspire people. You know, I know one of the softwares that we use and that I personally invested in is Bith.ai. Bith is Arabic for Broadcasting, I think, and Omar Dweck, the founder, is flying in from Amman, Jordan, into Leap. And so there's a lot of this. Like, we've got 2 guys from our Saudi office, our head of product, Mahmoud Saudi, from our Egypt office is flying in, and so is Aboud on a commercial team. So there's a lot of kind of convergence into Riyadh next week around startups, and there's a lot of big names. Who are the headliners?
A lot of them. His Excellency Abdullah Al Sawa, Minister of Communication and Information. Arvind Krishna, Chairman and CEO of IBM, big guy. I would say Iker Casillas is the biggest one for me. There's Andrea Pirlo coming. Francesco Totti is there. All of them are now entrepreneurs. Yeah. They're coming. Saudi Space Agency astronaut Rayana Barnavi is there. Some of the people that caught my eye, Supercar Blondie is there. It's a very good sign that she's there. Javier Tebas, president of La Liga. Some big names. Meta, Nicola Mendelssohn is coming. She's the head
Nicola
of the
Mendelssohn from Meta, yeah.
Yeah, Facebook, she's coming. Vusi Thembakwayo, I don't know if people know his name, but people know him from social media a lot. He keeps popping up. My Growth Fund Venture, he's a South African, very nice entrepreneur, kind of a guy who gives suggestions. Vishen Lakhiani, CEO of Mind Valley. Scale AI, Vijay Karunamurthy is also there. So someone from Scale AI is there. Recently we did a story, remember, that Scale AI CEO said that there's nothing in deep sea.
No,
it's
they
all
have a
fake.
great list.
Yeah.
No, really, Leap's
it's a
list
very
is crazy.
long, very unexhaustible list.
Yeah, and you know what I can honestly also tell people, Majid? Honestly, these panels that happen in these summits, they are not to be underestimated. Yeah. Like even when I was at SEF, like just simply from sitting there and listening, you learn so much. Like for example, Plasti Al-Aqad, the Palestinian journalist who, she was able to, tell the story of the entire genocide through just video format. It's something she said in her speech that I still think about. She said that, for the people whose stories I told, there were 2 kinds of people. Both of them had so much dignity. The first kind had so much dignity that they wanted their stories to be told. Like if they're, if astaghfirullah, their leg was cut off, they want that to be shown to the world. And then the second type was those who had so much dignity, they don't want their stories to be told. They don't want to be seen that way. And I remember even your panel, Rich. It's really funny. I told all my friends, I'm like, oh guys, Richard, he's going to speak about burnout. We're going to get some really good advice there. And they all went, by the way. And then I see it and it's like, I think burnout is good. Do you actually believe that?
I did use that quote, but then when I was editing the video, I said we need to rethink burnout.
Yeah.
And we need to rethink how we think of it as a negative. Because sometimes words in the English language have negative connotations. I think it's unnecessary. I think burnout is used too much. If I was training for a marathon and I was tired after a 30K run, would I say I burnout?
No.
If I'm studying for an exam and I'm doing a master's and I have to, 1 week I have to do a 70-hour week or 40-hour week studying, do I say I burnout? Well, maybe, and maybe you do the week after or whatever, but I think, how do people achieve in their career? Young people who want to succeed, it's accepted that to win a gold medal in the Olympics or to be Ronaldo, you have to push. To be academic or to achieve great studies, you have to push. You have to study. You have to put yourself under a bit of pressure. You need good coaching, good mentors, good teachers, good coaches, whatever. In the workplace, people don't feel they have to push. They think showing up is enough. Showing up isn't enough. So then if you feel that you've exerted, if 70% is showing up and you do 80, 90%, and then some days you do 100%, and then the next day you're tired or you burnt out. Now, if you do 100% for 3 weeks in a row, you're burnt out. Just like if you do 100% training in fitness for 3 weeks in a row, then you're not supposed to. So you have bad coaches and you have bad mentors. So it's on your line managers and your directors and your bosses to not let you burn out, to not let you do 100% all the time. But don't come to me after doing 100% once, and don't come to me at 50% and wonder for 3 years and wondering why you're not progressing. It just doesn't make sense. It's right.
Deep.
It's like exercise, right? Like you do a lot of workout, but you need recovery time. So it's fine to burn yourself out, but take some time for recovery and then again try again. I guess
I think we need to rethink the word
balance.
The burnout. It's like when Gary Vaynerchuk got cancelled for saying hustle culture or hustle porn or whatever the term was used against him at the time. He rephrased it because it was like, why are you telling us all to push so hard and to push ourselves to the limit? But he genuinely believed it was needed and it was an ingredient that made him successful. And then he can tailor it. Like I believe I pushed myself further and made sacrifices. And I still believe that's a fundamental part of success. Just like anyone who achieves, I remember one of the first events I covered in Love in Dubai, in the last 10 years, Michael Phelps, the famed American swimmer who's the most gold medals ever, listen to him. Did he complain about burnout?
He never did.
when he his coach used to say, money in the bank, an extra day swimming, they would have goals of how many lengths they cover every day. They wouldn't miss New Year's Day because they want to cover that day swimming because it's money in the bank. And that's the results. The results are the results. The results speak for themselves. No one, Ronaldo, like Mo Salah scored an unbelievable penalty last night. Every day on his Instagram, he posts himself in the gym, right? Whereas the contrast is the same age as him, Neymar, 32.
Yeah.
Neymar is overweight.
Yeah.
He's gambling, he's this, he's that, right?
He's broken up.
Yeah, but I know Neymar did have a cruciate or a ligament injury, but like I think the point is like it's clear to see, right? But Mo Salah isn't complaining about burnout. Man, he's played more games than anyone. He's not complaining about burnout.
Yeah, I see. No. It's funny that you mentioned this because I always tell Majid, like, it's my dream to sit with Neymar and tell him, like, why'd you ruin your career? No, because it's not ruined, don't get me wrong. He makes millions, but it's like, in my personal opinion, I think that he could have been the best footballer in the world because he had the natural talent.
But did he have the right advice? Like in my era, we grew up with Alex Ferguson putting Ryan Giggs and Wayne Rooney and everyone under his shell and David Beckham and everything. Now we see Marcus Rashford leaving Manchester United. That wouldn't happen under Fergie, right? Under Alex Ferguson. If Alex Ferguson, they used to say Paul Gascoigne, one of the famous English players who had addiction issues and things like that, they used to say that if he signed for Man United at that time, when he went from Newcastle to Tottenham, his life would have changed. And I think that sort of puts this relationship in perspective. I understand what this industry is. I've lived it and worked it for nearly 20 years. Other people have done it a lot longer. I'm responsible. I don't want people to be burnt out in our organisation. But also I know what it takes, and I know what it takes to be good, or I've seen other people do it. So I'm also know to call out bullshit when I hear it. I know if people are a little bit fatigued, I think it's a lot of the time it's been lazy. And I think we need to be... I think we need to be aware of that. But burnout is real, and I felt it, and it is. But I think, as I said in the SEF, I think it also, growth mindset during burnout allows you to understand what emotional intelligence is, and what are the symptoms of burnout. I get it in my face, I get tingly sensations, and I'm aware of it, right? So, but what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like blame the environment, blame the hardships of media, blame this amazing country, amazing city, amazing opportunity I have and say, oh, media is bad, or if the billionaire wouldn't pay us more money while we're not losing money. So, like if you're talented, now prove it.
Yeah.
But you know what it also is, Rich? Like, this is an agenda that they've been pushing on us, like, since they were young. Like, I was in school not so long ago. Like, I remember even one of my favorite teachers, like, she told me, she was like, Ward, if you continue like this, I fear one day you'll be so burnt out, you won't be doing anything. And it's like, what she said to me, it's like blaring in my mind all the time, like, no, that's not happening. But it's like, it is the agenda that teachers, like, mentors, they push onto us. Like, do a lot, but don't do too much that you're doing nothing one day.
It's just a new cool buzzword that everyone wants to use for being lazy, I guess.
But does your teacher really know you? Because I think you would be unsatisfied with yourself. You wouldn't feel self-actualized. And this is just me assessing, and I could be wrong, but I think some people, like if someone told me, like in my 20s, I didn't work as hard as in my 30s per se, because I just did more things. In my 30s, I really, really, really focused. And then I became happier and more content because I worked harder. But if I take the wrong advice, and in the end it was me advising myself. But look, during the pandemic, a lot of journalists left during Corona. Now we have 100 talented media people in the country, thanks to Naguib Suarez. I'm excited to see what these people do. Let's have a more thriving media ecosystem here. Let's have more podcasts. Let's have more Substacks. Let's have more digital media, modern media. We should. We've been influxed with talented people from around the world. If 80 of them do good and go on from here, it'll be better for all of us. The next media companies that hire the next Majids and Wards will, inshallah, be from the remnants and the spillover of the redundancies this week.
Yeah, and we were speaking about laziness a lot right now. Well, let me tell you, Saudi Arabia has not been lazy whatsoever. Their IPOs have outperformed those in the UAE and Egypt in 2024 with stronger post-listing stock appreciation. So essentially what happened is that investors actually favored mid-sized IPOs with solid fundamentals over high-profile listings that may have been overvalued in Saudi Arabia. And this is really beautiful to see, because what it actually goes to say is that a lot of people, the entire world is watching. And not only are they watching, but they're participating in Saudi Arabia. They're investing into Saudi Arabia, and they see the potential that's in it.
Yeah. And Saudi IPOs have been great. We saw Lulu go there. Sorry, I'm saying Lulu. Majid Al Oud was the one that I followed very closely. Again, oversubscribed, 120%. Then they, as soon as they opened, they hit the peak all 3 days. 30% is the most that you can go up. That was the most followed one by me.
Yeah, I followed Nice One.
Yeah, Nice One was very great.
The kind of beauty products e-commerce one. It stems from Aramco, doesn't it? But yeah, Tadawul. So it's the biggest. It's the value of the capital market in Saudi is the biggest in the region. But in the UAE you have three. You have in DFM you have DFM and Nasdaq Dubai in Dubai. You have ADX. You have three big ones in UAE. You have Kuwaiti Borsa, you have EGX in Egypt. So Tadawul is a bigger one, and they have agenda to get more people out there. I think there's going to be a few more to go public.
Yeah, and it's the post-listing stock appreciation. That's why Saudi led them, because wherever else anyone went for an IPO, the post-listing stock appreciation was the best in Saudi Arabia in last year. And I see that again. Saudi Arabia governor of PIF said, we're investing locally now. We're not going outside. We'll redirect our funds inside. So yeah, they're bringing the money back into the country now. Whatever they've earned through PIF, they're reinvesting it.
It'll be interesting to see what PIF does with its entities, because we talked about NBC. So they went public when they were independent, and then after they went public, PIF bought that 54% of them. But there's chemicals firms in Yanbu. There's lots of assets, Sabich. There's lots of huge, big petroleum and related energy assets in Saudi. There's huge entities within PIF, and there's a lot of new startups, like the ticket booking app of Saudi, which was called Yalhal originally, now it's WeBook. They want to go public. So it's the knock-on effect of everything that we see, the headlines from Turkey Al Sheikh, Riyadh season. It's that economics, like the knock-on effect of the companies around it. We see like 500,000, the coffee chain, that's doing well. Noog, the camel, owned by PIF, right? Like the tea brand. Like all these companies are suddenly getting bigger and bigger. We had Hunger Station, Jahez. There's loads of apps that are doing Sela, the Shopify of Saudi. These are amazing stories. There's lots of. A friend of mine, Mazin, runs Labaya, a mental health app that has had 3 million downloads in Saudi that no one else outside the kingdom knows of. Like we talk globally of like these famed mental health apps.
Mind Valley. There's so many. You get ads on them.
Yeah, and now they're Calm. I think what's the orange logo circle one called?
Don't remember. I see Mind Valley a lot.
But there's so many, and that's why I'm intrigued to go into Saudi.
And Embassy, as you said, it was one of the biggest risers in 2024. They went public on 8th Jan. The share price opened at 25 and they rose to 58.6. Like last Tuesday or Wednesday, they closed at 56. So 34% rise. So they were one of the big risers. And apparently it's funny that Rasan, it's a fintech app, they were the biggest riser in 2024. They opened at 37 reals and went up to 88.9 by Wednesday.
People can't understand this, Majid. I was talking to an investment banker from Kuwait recently, and he said, how did MEC, because they don't pay dividends, but I think the Saudi retail investor attitude is a bit different. In the UAE, a lot of people are investing in the utility apps, like Parkin and Salak and things like that, because you get high dividends, and they're linked to the state, they're semi-state. So let's see. I think it would be great if some of these trading apps were more easy to trade in the Saudi Tadawul. Like I'm able to trade. I have a Iqama Saudi residency, so I can trade through BHM Capital, the app in Abu Dhabi. But if you go on to Baraka, the app like Robinhood, you can't actually trade on the Saudi. And even the WEO app that everyone's using now, a lot of people are using now, you can trade on the UAE stock market, but not on the Saudi one. There are fintech apps in Saudi, but a lot of it is a little bit hard to get on. Alinma Bank have let you trade. They're in the news at the moment. They've just renamed the biggest stadium in Jeddah. But so lots to talk about on the Tadawul, and it's interesting times ahead.
There is. Interesting times ahead indeed. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This is Smashy Business Show, a Smashy Business production under the Augustus Media Podcast Network. You can find our newsletter on Smashy TV, and please make sure to follow us on all of our channels, and please have a lovely, lovely weekend.